Almost there. All right, and our YouTube live is connected. What time do we have? 6:58. We usually get rolling about 7:02. We'll give it a couple of minutes for folks to come in. I did just do a bunch of blasting and annoying people with messages past few minutes to see if I can remind them that we're kicking off tonight. I also saw a lot of likes and interest on some of the pages where that I shared this on. Hey, I see Jackie Boy. He's got visuals. Um,
All right.
One of them was a cannabis doctors and nurses page on Facebook, and a couple of other places that were medical and used some hashtags that I did a little search for on nurse and nurse life and that kind of stuff. So hopefully we get a little bit of folks that will find this really interesting. I know I'm going to find it interesting. I'm curious to find out a little bit more about your organization and what's involved. Um, and I just got messaged over here. Let me check. I have a feeling we might have. Do, 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 do. Okay, one of our guests is going to be a little late.
Well, I'm exasperated for living in a state where we're going to lose no matter what because it's a Republican state, and we're not even one of those states where it's borderline.
Well, there's some hope. The biggest hope is
That's
people get out and vote. Um,
that's
I,
what
I, I
Kerry
actually
said.
I actually saw a Live 5 news post on Facebook today, and I think WCBD News both posted about the MORE Act potentially coming up for vote in September, uh, in the next week or two or so. I don't think it's that far down the line. Um, uh, for the and it'd be really nice to see it pass the House. It would be a historic move. But then there's the Senate, and of course there's the three horsemen of the apocalypse, as they sometimes call them. We have Mitch McConnell, we have Lindsey Graham, and we have Mike Crapo, um, or and a big one's Mitch. He blocks. I don't know how many bills, 120 some was the last count I heard. Sitting on his desk waiting to get moved on to a vote, and they're of no interest to him. Uh, Although they might benefit people of our nation, um, they. Oh, I see somebody else I have to let in here. Um, but elections are coming up. And being in a district where Lindsey Graham has an opponent, um, it's going to be interesting to watch. You may see behind me, I have some of both of their. Actually, there's only one Jamie Harrison up above, but a couple of Lindsey ones here. Um, so that's going to be an interesting fight, and that's one that even has the attention of national. Bear with me a moment. I have a machine over here. I have to turn off. It's making too much noise. Um, I'll let it finish this last cycle. Um, so that's a race I'm really interested in watching. Um, Again, because it is local here, and if we could get Lindsay out of the way, um, Harrison's already mentioned, he's for decriminalization and medical. Um, I don't know. I'd have to go back and check my notes how far into it he is. But anyway, um, that's the one issue, and that's the one issue we always talk about, which is cannabis. uh, let's see. We have ticked over to 7:02. I need to really quick open up a document here in front of me. Let me find it. Open recent, July 2018. There it is. All right. I want to welcome everybody that's here with us this evening and anybody that's watching later on our YouTube channel. Uh, I always start our meetings with our disclaimer that all of our meetings are an environment of education and awareness. They are not an open market for the sale, purchase, or distribution of cannabis. We do not encourage or condone illegal behavior of any kind. Um, get that thing out of my way. Again, welcome everybody. I'm Scott Weldon. I am the director of Lowcountry NORML. You can find our website normal, NORMLSC.org. Um, and real quickly before we get started with our featured guest this evening, I did want to bring up, and now I had it on another page. I probably hit it. There it is, hiding under there. Just wanted to share some what we are considering big news right now. I just kind of rambled about it a few moments ago. Uh, it's on Normal's blog from back on the 28th. I think that was what, Friday. Um, but it's been discussed on some of our meetings with National for the past week or two now. Um, that the House lawmakers are preparing for a September floor vote on the MORE Act. The MORE Act is the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. Um, it would remove marijuana from the Federal Controlled Substances Act. It also has in there funding for expungement. Very important, very historic vote if it actually goes through and happens. We do believe that will happen. Um, uh, the challenge then going forward is to see if we could get a vote on the Senate side, which I don't see happening, but anyway, this is good news. This is very good news. If your legislator does not support at federal level, support the MORE Act, we ask you to call them, write them, email them. I like handwritten letters. They tend to have to actually document those as they come in the door, and they actually read them. So, but sort of letting them know what your position is on cannabis and hoping that they would support um, and sign on as a co-sponsor to the MORE Act. That is the biggest news that I have in federal cannabis legislation this week. We'll probably be talking about that again next week and the week after until we see the vote and see what happens. Um, the one thing I think is kind of also pushing this is, and I was just reading another article in it, or actually it was down further in this article. Um, the vice presidential nominee on the Democratic Party side is a lead sponsor on the MORE Act. Um, we believe that is going to add a tiny bit of weight to it um, as it moves forward. But I digress talking about that. We'll talk more about legislative stuff next week. Tonight, though, we have our featured guest with us is Michael Harvey. He's here to tell us about the American Cannabis Nurses Association. I believe it is the full. It is American, correct, Michael? Um, I had that. Actually, there it is, right in front of me. I have their logo. Um,
Yes, sorry, couldn't find mute.
that's okay. That's okay. But Michael's going to sort of tell us about the organization and what they do. Um, I find it kind of interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing about it, and I'm assuming this is an organization that's probably more active in legal states at the moment and not so much in South Carolina. Am I correct on that?
You're very correct.
All right. I'm just going to sort of hand the mic over to you for the moment and ask you to tell us a little bit more about the organization.
Okay, I'd like to share my screens if possible. I've not done this before on Zoom. Otherwise, because it's showing host disabled participant screening.
It shows host disabled it. Okay, let me get into my advanced settings on it then.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that should hopefully give you access now.
All right, so you should see my slides, but with my pretty mug shot on it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed the normal meetings that I've been attending for the last couple of months. I'd also like to say thank you to Barbara Ochester and Lisa McMillan, who are actively on Zoom with us. And then I expect that I have a number of other friends from the organization that are also have called in. Without them, I don't know if I'd have the guts to do this today. Let me see. Okay, so the first one is you should be seeing the main screen is the logo. The organization was actually founded in about 2010 as a nonprofit organization. My contact information is here, as well as the ACNA website. The American Cannabis Nurses Association, the mission is to advance excellence in cannabis nursing practice through advocacy, collaboration, education, research, and policy development. Our nurses are of a lot of different levels. We have nurses from basic nursing, still in school actually, all the way through advanced practice nurses. Currently our membership somewhere around 1,400 according to our latest status. You had asked the question about how active we were in South Carolina primarily. So yes, those states that have legal cannabis laws such as California, Oregon, and even some of our northern states have more availability to get out there and present. Many of us in states back down here in the Bible Belt are still in the closet for the most part. As much as most of you know or have caught, I'm still in the military, so for me to come out and even discuss cannabis has been a truly tragic experience. So to the right, the nurses and the other healthcare providers need information about medical cannabis. So our organization is trying to bring together groups of physicians, nurses, and even outside the clinical practice. That's why I was glad to be invited today to speak with NORML, just because I don't think that everybody's aware of that nursing is really pushing to support the cannabis practice. The National Council of State Board of Nursing actually has a number of requirements for nurses. Even if you're not a practicing cannabis nurse, you should still have a basic understanding of the endocannabinoid system, what your state laws are, and how to deal with your patients in a non-judgmental way. Patients are so fearful to walk into their clinic and say, yeah, I smoke a little bit of cannabis, or I take even just CBD while I take my, Halcyon or whatever. So as nurses, we need to be able to meet them at the bedside and explain to them that, it's not bad as long as you're doing it, appropriately and you're not abusing it. Safe uses of cannabis. We know that you can abuse anything. And of course, cannabis is another one of those. So we need to teach our patients, what safe use is. When you're going down and getting your first edibles, you don't eat the whole bag right off the bat. You're not going to have a nice first instance. Knowing these state and federal laws as we go from state to state is getting harder and harder. I just learned an hour ago that Georgia actually has a relatively robust medical cannabis law. Their card is a little bit different, but you can get a higher percentage of THC in your CBD. So I need to do some more research on that. Cultivation, handling, and storing. Although most of our nurses aren't practicing, well, I wouldn't say most, but there are a few. But those are all, again, in those states to the, the far west, the more progressive states. But the communication is our biggest thing. And the ACNA was brought up to help us communicate between the states. I've met a lot of very influential and very well-educated nurses. Even I have still some of that, stigma back there. These are probably, nurses or whatever in their 60s and 70s that are, stoned, but they're not actually. And a lot of them don't even really use much cannabis, but they are still pro advocates because they've seen what it can do in their patients. We have a Cannabis Care 2020 that's on the horizon. We were supposed to have been in Albuquerque, New Mexico, but according to COVID, we won't be. So we are going to be doing this online this year. This will be the second conference that I've been able to attend. The first one I went to last year was phenomenal. The people that they bring in to educate are outstanding presenters and leaders in their field. If you look at the bottom, I've got the listing of the two different tracks that we're actually going to cover. Advocacy, banking and finance, which in any of the cannabis business, even if you're just running a CBD store, lends to it its own critical issues with, police coming in your store and checking on your stuff, and you can't actually bank with a normal bank. So it's interesting. We have a long ways to go. For the newbies, we have the Cannabis 101, which I tend to go towards because there's just so much stuff that's available to learn. It's just at the basics. Again, back to the endocannabinoid system, how it interacts with medications. There's a long list of drugs that cannabis can interact in. You have to know what drugs to space your cannabis out from. Chronic pain and drug testing, and a couple other major topics. Let me get to my final pages. So back to the hurdles again. I know that there's one or two other nurses here in South Carolina that are active in the ACNA. So I'm hoping to get to meet them and maybe work to get us involved more in the legislative side. Stigma for nurses, I had already said. I'm going to be joining the South Carolina Compassionate Care Alliance with Jill Swing and try to get further into politics with cannabis. Continuing education is very difficult for anybody in the cannabis field because where do you go to get accurate, CMEs? And actually, the American Cannabis Nurses Association, along with a number of other sites, have some wonderful training from the very basic to advanced. There's a company up north that can actually, for a physician, that they can actually help you learn to prescribe cannabis based off of what he's researched and what he in his practice for the last 10, 15 years. And then finding employment in the cannabis related field. Anybody has any suggestions on jobs, please yell, because it's not having any luck on this end, not in South Carolina. I think I'll have one more slide. So I'd spoken about South Carolina Compassionate Care. There's Patients Out of Time, which is a national group. And then of course, I'm still trying to get involved with your group to be somewhat more productive than just a reading nurse. And because nurses have been considered the most honest and trusted profession for the last 18 years, we're hoping that nurses can make the major change in medical cannabis. So unless you have any questions or any of my fellow ACNA members would like to speak, I would love them to give their point of view. Go ahead.
I do have a quick question for you before Barbara starts in.
Okay.
You were going through some of the different features or programs among the ACNA, and you had in there like communication for different nurses to be able to collaborate or to talk to each other, to learn from each other. Um, is there a way to sort of direct patients or consumers to the ACNA and to your members to answer questions for them?
Barbara, can you cover that one?
I can. Hi, folks. We have a website listed on our big website, and you can click on contact us. And I actually am the person that gets the questions 9 times out of 10. And not because I can answer everything, because I know who to go to in order to get them answered. And we have patients and nurses write us questions periodically. I get 2 or 3 a week. probably. And most of them are from other nurses around the country that want to know how to get involved, how to get a job, that kind of thing. But they are able to contact us. It goes to our executive director, and then she meters out the questions to me or to a couple of other people.
Thank you, Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I also have another little anecdotal story, and I think this story sort of highlights why your organization is important to the medical profession. And this has to do with going to, actually, it was a college of dentistry, and I was having some work done there, um, and the dentist had said to me, be cautious about smoking cannabis, because of course I'm always wearing my advocacy shirts and hats and things like that wherever I go. I'm almost always talking to people about it. Um, and they have been doing some like deep cleaning and blah blah blah. And he talked about avoid consumption of cannabis because it could be detrimental, uh, without ever asking me my usage habits. And I thought it was sort of a little put offish to me, because it sounded to me like he really had probably never taken a class on the endocannabinoid system. He probably know it all about all kinds of other, the respiratory, the nervous system, blah blah blah. But and then probably months later, I happened to see another article, and it started talking about the antibacterial properties of cannabis, and they were actually showing like cleaning picks with that were had cannabinoids infused into them, saying that they helped reduce the bacterial growth. Um, so, so I was sort of like, well, ha ha to him. Cannabis could be beneficial, although I never said it to him. So that to me was just sort of my little anecdotal story where I think to be your organization seemed like a good source for um, people, especially nurses in the cannabis or in the field, who have questions about cannabis. They have a place then to turn to, and they're not working from old stereotypes and misinformation.
Could I address that, Scott, for you?
Absolutely.
Um, the interesting thing about physicians, I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse for 48 years. Worked with a few doctors here and there. And one of the things that I have found, I most recently was the clinical director of a medical cannabis dispensary in Bowie, Maryland, for 3 years, and did all of their education, wrote their materials, and did assessments on every patient that came in. And a lot of doctors, instead of learning about it, just make blanket statements like you should be really careful. The only thing I can think of as even a vague possibility with dental work is if he's going to give you some anesthesia, he needs to know, because he needs to cut down the amount of anesthesia he gives you, because cannabis will help you potentiate that. And the antibacterial picks are something that's just sort of funny. You should send him a package. The neurologists, I had a number of neurologists that actually turned the corner and would begin sending patients to me if their seizure patients were refractory and you just couldn't get a hold of it. And then, when they sort of wanted to throw their hands up, they would say, maybe you should try some cannabis, and I will write you, the appropriate paperwork to get certified. So,
Wow.
and the other thing I wanted to say is Michael's being very humble. He knows a lot more than he is letting on right here, and he's been a very valuable member at large in our organization. And I think that he needs to acknowledge that also.
Thank you, Barbara. So
Yeah,
you'd
I
mentioned,
figured he was being pretty humble. He's been with us for a couple of months, coming and joining our meetings, and uh, I, he kind of reminds me of myself when I'm not the meeting host. I like to sort of just sit back and listen and
Yeah.
not give a whole lot of input here and there, but every now and again, if I have something I feel important to say, I'll plug it in. And that's how I've been seeing how Michael is. And just the fact that, he's had the information about your organization behind him on the background each
I'm
week
wearing
that
the
he's
shirt
here.
too.
You
All
are. I don't even
right.
have one.
uh, he definitely got my interest up, and that's why we asked him to speak on the organization. So we definitely thank you for being here and talking to us tonight, Michael.
Thank you.
Any questions from any of our other viewers for our guests?
No.
While you were talking, and you mentioned Jill Swing and the Compassionate Care Alliance, uh, I did
Ah,
want to mention and actually, I'm going to steal the screen share here for a
Oh, yep,
moment.
sorry.
That's okay.
I do have a question.
Go for it, Jackie.
Um, I read that you only had to be a part-time resident in Florida to apply for a medical marijuana license, that you did not have to live there full time. Something about just showing a water bill or something that shows that you're there for a certain amount of time a year. I'm wondering if that's working for the same in Georgia, or is that true for Florida also? Is my question.
I just read that a couple of weeks ago because my wife and I are flirting with moving to Florida, and we go
Yeah.
there quite often. There is a restriction on the minimum days that you can, having remained in Florida before you can be considered for medical marijuana, and it's not very long. I want to say
I
it's
think
3 months.
I thought it
So
was 30 days.
I'll have to go back and check. I'll try to
Okay.
find that before the next meeting next week to clarify.
Thank you, Mike.
And
How
there's got to
about
be ways
Georgia?
around that.
Yeah.
How about Georgia? Anything on Georgia
No,
like
like I
that?
said, I was just learning on the new cannabis CBD law with the allowable
Oh,
20
oh,
milliliters. You're
oh,
allowed to 20 milliliters CBD with a max of 5% THC,
yeah.
and their conditions are very, very strict. I mean, it was a lot of end of life, final stages of it's chronic
Uh,
pain was not one of them. I mean, it was, but it had to be. You're going to have a problem getting permission for that one.
yeah, I know. Even having cancer doesn't work. You've got to be dying of cancer, like
Yes.
momentarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in hospice was one of the options. And
Ah,
so,
But there is hope. I mean, look at Oklahoma. Who would have thought? Who
yes.
would have thought? Because Oklahoma has
no,
one of the most liberal laws in the United States. Previously, I'm from Pennsylvania, and we
right.
had 17 criteria, which was a pretty large amount, how the reasons and the way that you can get cannabis. But then Oklahoma hit, and I thought, holy mackerel.
You never know where it's going
Gladiators
to
or
come, right?
30, yeah, those cowboys out there know what's good for them, right?
That's right.
So there's hope for Georgia. It's just a matter of bringing people along. And sometimes what it takes is either to have a child die or somebody you know die of an opioid overdose. That'll do it for you. And
Hmm.
then the other thing is to have such excruciating, horrible pain that you can't tolerate it or you can't eat during cancer treatments and stuff. And somebody who is part of the legislative, if that happens to them, then they
Yes.
then they have a tendency to say, oh, especially if their grandchild says, just smoke this joint, or, Grammy. And then they'll come back and say, oh my goodness, this really
We
works.
need to legalize it. Well, I think that's
Yep.
what happened with Peter McCoy with his child. That's why it got fast forwarded, because his child had something that CBD would help. And in fact, he's a friend of mine, and I went to high school with him, and I thought that meant he was pro marijuana. I had him put a sign in my yard. And then after the election, he qualified the fact that no, it was just for CBD, and he was avidly against the THC part. So there you go about what you were saying. It's what they need when they're in the position to get it.
Yeah.
Mm. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, it's just sad. I
I'm
need to
going to
be
go.
governor.
I'll vote for you.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. I'm going to bring this back up real quick because you had mentioned Jill Swing and the Compassionate Care Alliance. And I know this is one of the events that she's promoting. Actually, it's two separate events. There is a full day conference and a half day conference for their annual medical marijuana conferences. The half day conference information is right here on first as you're scrolling down the page. Um, and this is at MUSC in downtown Charleston. And it also has then down here their agenda. So it looks like things start at about noontime. Uh, Okay, it says 1 to 5 after registration. Their day conference is in January on the 29th. And again, you can see the beginning of their agenda, but it'll be an expanded agenda from what they have on this one up here.
And I'd
It looks like
recommend this. This was the first medical conference I went to for cannabis last year. This is what got me going. The presenters for this are PhD. They had they're trying to get the one of the ladies from NIDA to speak. This is just overwhelming information. A lot of it, MUSC is actually doing a lot of research into medical cannabis, and we're not hearing about it. So
That's
this
right.
is
Yeah, and I don't see it here on my screen. I don't probably have it buried somewhere. There was some information on an MUSC study just released, I think, this past week as well. Um,
is that the one on THC is potentially able to be used in COVID treating. Actually, it's ARBs.
yeah, yeah, and that's one that normal in general does not push or promote any medical, COVID kind of stuff because it's so uh, unregulated, I guess, at the moment. But this was an MUSC study that definitely needs to be shared a little bit more. I've just been a
Yeah.
little apprehensive because we are a little apprehensive on trying to make that connection because of some paper here or there until there's actual viable information. Although just through the fact that it's an anti-inflammatory, to me that gives some indication that it could help with the inflammation that seems to be an issue with this virus. Um, but yeah, that was the report. Now that you mention it, it happened to be THC could be beneficial in COVID treatment.
Uh, good, good,
But
very good.
yeah, so easy to find. Just type in MUSC marijuana, and it'll give you a link basically to their conference information. Um,
Uh,
and
very good.
my plan is probably to sign up for the January full day one. Um, I don't know if there's a whole lot of difference in what's going to be covered, but I know the half day
Would
one I'm
you?
seeing right off the bat. There's quite a bit of information on CBD and arthritis, CBD and inflammation, uh, CBD used amongst emergency patients. So it's a lot more CBD oriented. It looks like on the half
Mhm.
day conference,
Of course.
but good information, as Michael said. Definitely, I haven't been to them, so I can't say. And every time, last year when I didn't go, I had so many people say to me, "You didn't go? Oh my God, there was such great information. It was blah, blah, blah." I'm like, all right, maybe I should have gone. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm so immersed on it. I sometimes I think I know a lot of it already. Um, eh, and I think there was actually somebody there last year. Uh, uh, University of Mississippi. What the heck was his name? The person in charge of growing cannabis for the DEA.
Yes, he was there.
And I'm thinking, I don't even want to hear this guy because from what I hear, they grow ditchweed as nothing in comparison to what they actually sell in dispensaries. Why do I want to listen to this clown? But I'm told he had some good information after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, oh, I don't want to hear him. That's annoying.
I
that,
think they've
that,
improved a little bit. I mean, they certainly are not the same organization that grew cannabis for Robert Randall when he was treating for glaucoma. And I think they have improved a little bit. And I know that I'm hearing a great deal of frustration from the person. It says iPhone, but I'm assuming that you have another name. Um, uh,
that's Jackie.
yeah,
Yep.
Jackie, that you're really frustrated, and it's painful. And the problem and how problematic this is for people, especially in my dispensary. We had 57% of people over 65,
Mm-hmm.
and these are the people that live through this is your brain on drugs. They were told by Nancy Reagan that that cannabis was a drug that was equally as bad as heroin. And I just finished a paper on this, and I found a quote from President Reagan, and I checked it because I thought this
Oh,
cannot possibly be true. It just can't be. But in fact, it was true. And he said that he had just learned that smoking one marijuana cigarette was equal to being on Bikini Island during the dropping of the H bomb.
oh my
I mean,
God.
that is so incredibly ridiculous that you and I and any educated person that has any inkling about this subject knows that's not true. But I mean, he said that. He said that to the
May I
American
may I,
public.
may I speak on Reagan? I happen to be living.
How much time do we have?
I happen. Just a moment. Uh, I happen to be living on Maui when Reagan sent in 25 helicopters for Operation Green Harvest and
Wow.
to completely eradicate the growing of marijuana on all the islands. And that was basically the source of cannabis for anyone on the islands. So they came in, and as we were surfing, we saw these helicopters going by with all the cannabis, and our friends saying, "No, I got a bottle of whiskey, and I suggest you get the same." So that happened, but the ramifications were this. Next thing you know is you see kids on the street on meth crystal,
Sure.
opiates, dying because there is no cannabis, because they want something recreational. They're kids. And if there is no cannabis there and there's a pusher with the bad stuff, they'll go there and they'll die. And
Mm.
that's exactly what happened on every single island in Hawaii. Not just Maui, but Oahu, which was the worst. And that's just an example of what happens when you take marijuana from someone who's been enjoying it for years. Everything was quiet, copacetic, the hippies and the surfers, and then it was ruined.
Yeah.
And
and that's
Reagan thought,
and that's still going on today. The kids are no dummies. They know that the cannabis will stay in their system for weeks or on end, and so if they smoke that joint with their buddies on Friday night or Saturday night, their parents could test them weeks later and find them popping hot. So they're trying the MDMA. They're trying the I don't even know what all the other new drugs are. I'm a mid '70s guy, so it was weed and LSD for me. But they're no dummies, so they're taking these chemicals instead to clear their system in 24 to 48 hours. They can go out and they can have themselves their nice high, and it's much more dangerous, but only the physical side of it. The dangerous side of getting caught later has been reduced now because it clears their system. Um,
right.
and it's basically the anti-marijuana sentiment in our country that has pushed our children to use these other drugs because they can get away with it easier and put them in a more dangerous situation. So I agree with you, and that's been a lot of my argument. You, you mentioned Nixon, and I will just blow up kind of, and then right after that mention Reagan, and somebody mentioned them, and I just said to him, "Yeah, I'd like to go and trickle down on his grave." Uh, and so we're there with you, Jackie. We're definitely there with you
Thank
on
you.
some of that. That
Thank
the
you.
politics and the propaganda has been relentless. Um,
For
my
50 years.
a lot of it for me, being as old as I am in my early 60s, I missed the 1960s myself and kind of got to watch the Vietnam War on TV and such like that. And in the early 70s, kind of was, oh man, it would have been so cool back then. Um, anyway,
It
I
was
sit
really
down.
cool back then.
It was very
I
cool
Was
bet
back
it
very
then.
cool
was.
back then.
But I listened to like one of my favorite songs is "Don't Step on the Grass, Sam" by Steppenwolf,
Yeah.
1967, I think that one came out,
Yeah.
and it's already telling the government, come on, leave the cannabis alone, don't bother. Or a famous one many people know, the Steppenwolf song, "The Pusher," made
Yeah, the
popular
difference.
on the Easy Rider movie. Uh, that there was a difference between the pusher and the pot dealer, the drug dealer. Uh, that the opioids were definitely a much more dangerous thing. We knew that 50 plus years ago. Um, the government just doesn't want to hear it. I mean, even Nixon was told by the Schaefer Commission we should basically just decriminalize. In about 72, I think he was told that because of they had to run a 2 year study. Um, and he just went, "What the hell's wrong with these crazy Jewish scientists? The damn Jews are
Yeah.
crazy." Yeah, he was
Yeah.
such a freaking bigot and racist and anti-Semitic son of a bitch. I
Sound
just can't
familiar?
stand
Sound familiar?
it.
Yeah,
I was pretty
Hmm.
young watching that asshole, and it stuck with me all these years, man.
yeah.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy!
So anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
I happened
you
to
can
mention
hear it
that
in my voice.
I happened to be mentioned that I was using the CBD to one of my nurses, and they were all hovering around trying to take blood from me. And here comes the big doctor in. Oh, so you've been using CBD. How long have you been using that drug? I said, since 1966. And everybody in the room cracked up. That shut her up.
Well, okay. I think I turned my screen share off on the seminar or on the conferences. Let me just double check our time. We're a little past. It was 7:38. I'm showing. Um, Again, I just want to kind of emphasize that I think the organization is very intriguing. I think it's probably going to, as Michael mentioned earlier, as laws change or the landscape changes here in South Carolina, I'm sure you'll start seeing more nurses and nursing students becoming more interested in the organization and learning about this. I mean, I'm surprised. Uh, well, I can't say I'm surprised they're not already clamoring to sign up because, as you had mentioned earlier, there's still the stigma here, and if people sort of even uh, let on to their family or their employer that they're intrigued and may support this, that could cause repercussions. And so, coming out of the closet for cannabis support is not necessarily a snap of the fingers. Um, There's a lot of people that it could jeopardize their job. It could have their family kind of shun them. Um, I don't know. I moved from Pennsylvania myself as well, and so I'm being in the buckle of the Bible Belt is kind of quite different from me. Uh, I grew up more amongst the Mennonites, and they were kind of they did their own thing, and they were some of the greatest people I met. But um, it's quite different in the South Carolina Bible Belt and the religiosity of the communities here. Um, that There more and more are coming around. If when I say like the devil's lettuce or Satan's cabbage, I get more giggles nowadays than agreement. uh, but South Carolina is going to be unique in its battle as much as the Southeast is going to be. Just the map that you showed earlier about where we're legal states, where we're recreational states, where we're CBD only states, um, and that whole southeast corner around South Carolina is pretty much still just the CBD area. Um, so I'm hoping as our legislators start to hear the voters, our citizens, and a lot of the citizen support, especially for medical purposes. I mean, the numbers a couple of years ago, back in the last primary on the Democratic side, they asked a question, and I think the number was 84% said they were in favor for medical, uh, up 2% from when they asked it a few years earlier at 82%. The Republicans didn't ask that question on a ballot, but polling still shows that they're probably 56% or higher on average. So the numbers are above 50%, and they are growing. Um, and so now we just need our legislators to actually hear us, and hopefully the voters to vote on the subject. So I will kind of finish up tonight's conversations real quickly by talking about our Smoke the Vote uh, voters guide that we're working on. I did mention last week that I would have a letter campaign out so that um, folks around, voters around the state could write a letter to their particular legislator and ask them their opinion on cannabis and ask them to participate in our candidate questionnaire. that information that's put into the candidate questionnaire is then filtered into our voter guide. Um, and it is a big question in South Carolina. This, as many of you know, just by the last statement of the number of supporters that we have, or voters that support. Um, and there's a couple of good battles that are going to be going on this season. As I mentioned earlier, the Lindsey Graham and Jamie Harrison.
Yeah.
Harrison's already come out, pro decriminalization, pro medical, um, pro ending civil asset forfeiture, um, and Lindsey, points at the crazy liberals, and that's kind of all that he does. I think is his last campaign. Oh, he's a liberal, and he supports another liberal, and
I read where the sex workers call him Lady Graham.
Lady
Lady
G,
G.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Lady G.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a big battle, and yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to be watching this from the Kentucky area, but Mitch McConnell is up for yeah, election again, re-election, and I know there's somebody running against him. I forget who. Um, I don't know about Mike Crapo, um, but he's another one of the what we call the three horsemen, the anti-cannabis.
Mm.
Uh, but anyway, we have a lot of interesting elections, and so that's why right now we are trying to concentrate our efforts on gathering some of this information for our voter guide. Let the voters know um, that cannabis is an issue this election. I mean, even at the national level, it's been brought up. I know the RNC had made a couple of negative remarks on it, and I believe I heard the president say something about, oh, we don't want marijuana to be on an issue because it's going to bring out more Democratic voters. Well, I
Mm.
hate to say, I think
Stupid
if it
ass.
was an issue, it's also going to bring out more Republican voters because it's becoming an issue for them. And if they're not just party line voters, uh, if they're issue voters, they may vote for one or two candidates that support cannabis and move us forward. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. But that's kind of
Wouldn't
our
it be
big.
wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful if Kamala and Joe won South Carolina?
Well, I don't see South Carolina going that way, but it would be nice.
It
Uh,
would be. It would be. That's what I
here we
dream
are
about.
we're in the Charleston area, so we're basically a little blue dot in a big red state. Um, I don't see the rest of the state following. I could feel hopeful because I'm in the Charleston area, but once I look at the rest of the state, I'm going,
I know. I'm a dreamer.
yes, you are. Yeah, but then again, hey, I was down there at the primaries, holding up wearing my Bernie shirt and stuff like that.
That's
You
right.
see where that got us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it may have gotten us
anyway,
Kamala. Yeah.
it may have gotten us Kamala, but
Right.
yeah. So anyway, Michael, I want to thank you and Barbara also for joining us tonight and telling us about your organization. If we get anybody kind of following up with questions, we'll forward them on to you.
Thank you.
Um, Next week, our plan is again same time every Sunday, 7 p.m. to be here. We will be talking a little bit more about next week about our voter guide and getting out the vote, collecting information stuff, and then don't know what's on our schedule after that, but we will really be kind of talking about. Hopefully, that letter campaign will be up running. The challenge right now in the letter campaign is I have in the database, I have email addresses for all the incumbents, but the database I have of all the candidates does not include their email addresses, and so I'm going to have to go and sort of start entering those in one by one. And I think there's 180, 170 seats in the state. I don't know how many of them are actually up for election. And we've also then harvested out a sheriff's list as well because I'd like to sort of direct another letter campaign at the sheriff's candidates and see how supportive of reform they are. Anyway, we'll talk more about that stuff next Sunday, 7 p.m. Right back here, same link we always have on the South Carolina Cannabis Conversation Online. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon. Bye
Good
bye now.
night, everybody.